Uh, Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Green, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. This webinar is a part of the Bureau of Transportation series called Behind the Numbers, which is an ongoing series of presentations on a variety of topics related to BTS. Each webinar dives into how BTS and partner agencies and groups collect, analyze, disseminate, and use transportation statistics. Today, Rolf Schmitt of BTS will provide a historical account of how BTS has evolved over the last 25 years and how the agency functions today and what its future goals are. Following Dr. Schmitt's presentation, Sean Jahanmir, also BTS Office of Transportation Analysis, will dive into some examples of the data collected over time. To give you a little background on Dr. Schmitt, he's a Deputy Associate Administrator and Deputy Director of the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. He returned to the Bureau in 2012 after 12 years in Freight and Operations Offices of the Federal Highway Administration. He helped establish BTS in 1992 and served as its Associate Director for Transportation Studies until 2000. His federal career started in 1977, which includes positions within the Department of Transportation's National Transportation Policy Team, the Federal Highway Administration's Policy Office, and the National Transportation Policy Study Commission. He serves on the Federal Committee on Statistical Methods and on several committees and task forces for the Transportation Research Board. Dr. Schmitt holds a BA in Geography from California State University, Los Angeles, and a PhD in Geography from Johns Hopkins University. Without any further ado, I hand it over to Dr. Schmitt.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining in today's webinar. I'm glad to be with you today to discuss BTS, its products, and our future plans. And I'm hoping this will lead to some feedback from everyone to help us serve the transportation community as our products evolve. And they've certainly evolved quite a ways over the last 25 years. BTS was created by the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act over 25 years ago. Our products evolved rapidly as technology came online. We started in a world that was still dominated by floppy disks and quickly moved to CD-ROMs. Soon after our creation, a new thing called Mosaic, which was a graphical web browser, inspired us to establish a website, www.bts.gov, and begin distributing our products over the web. When you look at our website, you may still see some vestiges of those early, very early pages as we've evolved over time. Since its earliest days, BTS has existed at the intersection of four very different worlds. First off, BTS is part of DOT. It started out as a separate operating administration before being moved to the Research and Innovative Technology Administration, and now part of the Office of the Secretary's Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology. No matter where in the department we've been located, our main mission is to provide timely, accurate, credible information on the U.S. transportation system, the movement of people and goods, and the consequences of transportation for the economy, society, and the environment. We are the preeminent source of statistics on commercial aviation, multimodal freight, and transportation economics. We also try to provide context for all these numbers, exploring what they mean. That's not to say we talk about policy. We are to be an objective agency and policy neutral, but we do at least try to describe what's going on in the transportation system and give policymakers enough information about the numbers so that they can use them for informed decision making. And we do this primarily through publications such as our Transportation Statistics Annual Report. Now, BTS numbers are used in the understanding and performance of the transportation system, and certainly BTS is happy to advise others on how to design performance measures, but we really don't get into some of the performance measurement discussions that you hear in places like the Federal Highway Administration in dealing with some of the requirements under MAP 21 and the FAST Act. This chart explains different aspects of performance measurement and our basic approaches to them, ranging from fairly simple measures of the state of the world to things that are more actionable conditions, to measures which, and by actionable conditions, I mean measures that really help you identify specific problems within the general state of the world. And those are areas that we focus on fairly heavily. We leave it to others primarily to deal with the outputs and outcomes of actions that are taken to deal with the problems that are identified in some of those basic indicators and actionable conditions. The other world we're part of is the world of the principal federal statistical agencies. Now, we are not the only statistical organization in DOT, and we are actually only one of 13 principal federal statistical agencies that are the principal members of the federal statistical system. Other agencies, some are very well known, like Census, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Environmental Information Administration. There are actually two statistical agencies in the Department of Agriculture, the National Agricultural Statistical Service and the Economic Research Service. There's the National Center for Health Statistics, the National Center for Education Statistics, a Bureau of Justice Statistics, and there are statistical offices in the Internal Revenue Service, the Social Security Administration, and the National Science Foundation. We are probably in the U.S. the most decentralized statistical system amongst the major countries. Typically, like our colleagues in Canada, most the statistical programs are consolidated in one agency. In that case, Statistics Canada, though Transport Canada does have some data collection programs. Just as in the United States, we have the 13 principal federal statistical agencies, but there are 115 other federal statistical programs. In DOT, we have the National Center or the Center for Statistics and Analysis in the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. FHWA has its highway statistics programs and its Office of Policy. FDA has the National Transit Database. There's the Rail Waybill program and the Federal Railroad Administration and the Surface Transportation Board. And then, of course, waterborne commerce from the Army Corps of Engineers. Yes, only the United States has the Army keep track of waterborne movement. And, of course, there are many, many other federal data programs embedded in throughout the federal government that are sources of statistics, and we try to find all of them that are relevant to transportation. The main thing about the 13 principal federal statistical agencies is that we really pay attention to being a trusted source of objective information. And we are assisted in this by the Office of Management and Budget, which provides statistical policy directives to make sure that our information is objective and protected from political influence. These, among other things, require that our numbers not be subject to political approval when it comes to the methods or the results that we come up with in applying those methods to study a question. And we try to adhere to published schedules as a way of assuring people that data are not being delayed or even moved up just for the some political end, but rather we are being very objective in how we produce and publish our data. Beyond those two worlds, we are also part of the geographic data world. It's a little different than the federal statistical agencies it involves a slightly different set of characters, since a lot of it focuses more on natural resources and environmental conditions. Those agencies, like the United States Geological Survey and NOAA and others, generate really, really big data sets and are typically presented, and the results are typically presented in the forms of maps. Now, in our case, BTS is responsible for the National Transportation Atlas database, which consists of a compilation of geographic layers, if you will, describing the transportation system flows over the networks, and then our consequences for surrounding areas, plus how surrounding areas affect the demand for flows on that network. Now, we compile most of that information for the National Transportation Atlas database, but in fact, we do create two layers ourselves, the National Transit Map and the National Transportation Noise Map. You know, most people know us by the maps we produce from the National Transportation Atlas database through things such as our infrastructure map, which really is a nice fold-out publication. Those of you who go to the Transportation Research Board and stop by our booth have hopefully picked up a copy, which shows the whole system. But the more interesting parts are when we start looking at things like the flows in the network. This happens to be freight flows, which we've estimated. If you wonder what that big green line in the middle of the map is, that's coal moving from the Powder River Basin to the Midwest of the United States. Blue line is waterborne movement, and red is trucking movements. This all comes from our freight analysis framework, which I'll mention a little later. The world of information is, of course, not just statistics and data and maps. Actually, for most of the public, particularly of us in the older generation, information is all that knowledge that are housed in libraries. We go get books. We are actually, this is where BTS differs from all the other statistical agencies, we are actually the home of a library, the National Transportation Library, which is an online collection of over 30,000 documents containing information and research on all aspects of transportation. It's also the home of the National Transportation Data Archive, an activity that is just getting underway, as well as providing reference services for the public and some technical services for librarians. In particular, this is where you end up when you call our 800 number and ask or send an email asking for public information. And I'll mention those at the very end of the slides. For most people, though, the National Transportation Library is getting access to those 30,000 documents, which we use through a portal that we call Rosa P. When you go to our website, you click on the NTL button, it will take you to this interface, and you can search through a mass of products, mass of publications and data files, searching by subject mode, publisher, author, and other characteristics. Now, the range of products we create in BTS to meet the needs of a diverse set of customers is pretty wide. We go from bite-sized information nuggets to large reports. We go from pre-made tables and maps to do-it-yourself tables and maps. And it's all available on our website at bts.gov. On the report end, our flagship publication is our Transportation Statistics Annual Report, which we have put out annually since 1994. This is really the story of transportation, heavily illustrated with maps, graphs, and tables. And it also is an annual assessment of the state of statistics. One of the questions that we would love your feedback on, for those of you who have used this report, is whether if you will, the large book format that we have been using for the last 25 or 20 plus years, is that still a useful way of transmitting information, or are there other forms that would be more useful, other ways of telling the story? We're certainly open to experimenting with other forms. We do have requirements, not just for this annual report, which is a report by our director to the Congress and the President every year. We're also required by Congress to report on a couple of specific topics. One is the port performance, the Freight Statistics Program, where we're asked to report on the throughput and capacity of the nation's top ports in terms of tonnage, in terms of container traffic, or in terms of dry bulk. We also have a relatively new program looking at tank cars, railroad tank cars, to see which ones are of old standards versus new standards, and how quickly the new standards are coming in to improve the safety of movement of flammable materials in railroad tank cars. We also publish a series of facts and figures and related publications where we do try to take a slightly different approach. Instead of these, if you will, text-heavy stories, really these are compilations of graphs, maps, and summary tables with very brief text describing them, covering large subjects such as passenger travel, freight transportation, or economic trends in transportation. Of course, one of our questions here is whether these volumes that cover broad ranges of topics are useful, or would you rather see the volumes targeted on more specific topics, say within the area of freight, or within the area of passenger travel, within the area of economics. Beyond the books we publish, we also put out quite a variety of, we'll call it more bite-sized information in the form of issue briefs, data releases, and something we call the information gallery, which we're really just getting underway under our website, where you'll be able to go directly to a graph such as this one of the Transportation Services Index, get information about that graph, and then use it wherever you'd like to use it. I will point out that all BTS products are in the public domain, and so feel free to copy them. We just ask that you give us credit. And if you let us know that you're using it, it's even better, because then we can track how useful our products are for the public. Now, beyond these, I mentioned commercial aviation is one of our big areas. Here's where we have a wealth of information that probably ranges from bite-sized to hard to digest because it's so big. Among other things, we collect every 10th airline ticket issued to get an idea of where people are traveling to and from in the commercial aviation system and how much you're paying for tickets. We collect ridership and other information on every flight by commercial airplanes in the United States. We collect information on transportation or on aviation finance. And probably our most popular statistic, we collect information on how much airlines make on baggage fees. For some reason, a very popular subject with our readers. Now, a lot of this information, while you can dig into the website and dig through our databases to do your own tabulations, we do put it out, particularly as new information is added to these large collections, through statistical releases. If you go to the BTS newsroom, which is in the drop-down menu from the upper right-hand corner, you can get to this page and search through various subjects to see the most recent information we come up with. In the aviation area, we actually publish information monthly. Now, For some people, words and graphs are nice, but they really want to get into the tabular data that this is all based on. We have published, we actually started early on picking up a publication that had originated at the Volpe National Transportation Systems Center, a sister agency to BTS in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Research, called National Transportation Statistics. This publication actually goes back to 1971. And we continue it, not in print form, but as tables we keep adding on to every year, trying to cover just about every subject people are interested in the transportation field. We also publish some tables at the state level in a sister publication, State Transportation Statistics. And we are looking at new ways of presenting this information, not just as tables, but in more graphical form, such as a State by the Number series, which we put out a couple of years ago, and which we're looking at implementing in an electronic form. So when you go to the website, you can pull up a dashboard, click on the state, and get all sorts of information, both tabular and graphical. Of course, if you really like to build your own tables, we have a number of data sets that you can just go to a web page, select the variables from drop-down menus, and pop out the table of interest for your own particular application. You will be seeing a demonstration of how one of these systems, the one developed for our transporter data set, works a little later in this webinar. And of course, beyond all the tables and the statistical graphics, we do have our maps. Not only the print map that I showed you in the beginning, and some of the static displays, such as the flow map that shows up in publications such as Straight Facts and Figures, but you can also build your own maps. We have a geospatial portal which allows you to go select your layers and put together the publications, put together whatever layers of information you want, and zoom in to the particular geography of interest. One of our most popular print publications, and certainly our smallest in terms of dimensions, was The Pocket Guide to Transportation, which literally does fit in your pocket. It is also now available as an app for your smartphones, whether it's Apple products or Android products, and it seems to have been a fairly popular product to date. Of course, is this really useful? If it is, we certainly want to continue using it, and are there ways to make it work even better? I mean, it is asking a lot to stuff all that information on a small cell phone screen, but if it works for you, it certainly works for us. And we would certainly like to hear your experience with it. Indeed, for all of our products, the basic questions we ask, do we have what you want? Are we providing what you want? Is it easy to find what you want? Is it in a useful form? And are there new topics or other forms of information that would be useful? I'd love to hear your suggestions either at the end of this webinar, or you can just send it to me at that email address. We're glad to consider any and all ideas. And of course, if you have questions for us, there's a statistic you can't find at our website. We do have public information numbers, the answers at dot.gov for email, or you can call us at the 1-800 number, which locally in Washington is at 366-DATA. That's 366-3282 for those of you who don't remember the alphabetical system on phones. I must be showing my generation. Anyway, we hope that you will find what you need on the web pages. Some of those web pages actually have program-specific mailboxes, such as our Freight Analysis Framework, which has its own email address if you have questions specific to that program. And we encourage you to get in touch with us through any of those means. And that pretty well wraps up an overview of what BTS, where BTS has been, what we have been producing, and we hope with your ideas we'll be producing even more useful products in the future. With that, I will turn it back to our moderator to help you take you on a deeper dive into one of our programs, the Transporter program, which has been with BTS since the floppy disk days in the 1990s. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf. Next up is going to be Sean Jahanmir, who is a transportation analyst with BTS as well. His focus areas are mainly on North American freight transportation data, including vehicle and pedestrian border crossing counts, merchandise flow data, and international multimodal freight transportation data analysis. Mr. Jahanmir, I hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Michael. And thank you very much, Rolf, for your presentation. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. So at this point, I want to talk about our Transborder data program and the evolution of this program over time. This kind of fits in with Rolf's presentation because we're going to talk about, give an example of this program over the years and how it's evolved. And just to give a background of what the Transborder Freight Data Program is, it was established in 1993 in the early days of BTS. It's the only U.S. government data source with geographic and commodity data by mode of transportation with Canada and Mexico. This data program provides North American freight data by commodity type, mode of transportation by geographic detail, like I said, with Canada and Mexico. The data are used for trade corridor studies, transportation infrastructure planning, marketing and logistics analysis, and data releases. And we actually have a monthly and annual press release that we put out for the Transborder program detailing the monthly data. And in the early days of this program, this is kind of how it looked like. If you visited the BTS website, you would see this screenshot here. And at that time, we got the data from census on a floppy diskettes. I have to laugh every time I say that because I just can't imagine doing that nowadays. But at that time, we did do much of our work using floppy diskettes, and we made the data available to the public via a DBF file. So if you wanted to get some Transborder freight data at that time, you would go to our website, and this is how the banner looked like at that time, and you would be presented with this box with these capital Ds where you could download the data in a DBF file format, and you would have to open it with a spreadsheet, or at that time you kind of had to be an expert in using computers to be able to access these files. I put a quotation in of our FAQ where it said, one option is to go to DOS prompt and type the name of the file without the .exe extension to open the file. And that's just a good example of how kind of complicated it was at that time. And we also did not have vessel and air data at that time either. So it was just very basic. And by the late 1990s, we were able to get a search box available. And that's how our banner looked like at that time. It was still the same data. The technology improved a little bit. We were using OLAP Cube database at that time and CD-ROMs instead of floppy disks. But it was still, basic search and query tool. And it was still a little slow, though, at that time. It took several minutes sometimes to return results. And moving on to the late 2000s, when I joined BTS, we had a little bit more robust search tool developed by that point using Oracle as the foundation platform technology, and we downloaded the data from Census through an FTP system, and so it had become much more streamlined and efficient by that time. And the users would select the measures they wanted to get information for and download it into a standard Excel spreadsheet. So there were no more technical barriers or hurdles to jump through. It was just pretty easy to get the data, but it was still just, plain data format once you were able to download it into Excel. Or you could have just viewed it on our website at this point as well. And then around this time, we also introduced air and vessel data into the transborder data. And currently, this is how it looks now, and we are using Sybase and Tableau to present the transborder data through a series of interactive dashboards and graphics. And what's new and different about this format is that users can directly engage with the graphics on the website by clicking on the maps or chart bars to obtain the data, or we still also have the option to download it into Excel crosstab if needed. And at this point, I'm just going to jump into an example of kind of do a live demo of how it looks like. So I'm going to share my screen. Can we do that, Mike?
Yes.
Get that option available.
Should see it in front of you now.
Yeah, it's coming up. Okay, so this is the way it looks now, and well, actually, this is the landing page I was showing you guys on the presentation. So when you first, and this is the URL, by the way, it's www.bts.gov/transborder. And like I said earlier, the Transborder Data Program is the only U.S. government source of freight data and analysis by mode of transportation and commodity with Canada and Mexico, by month and year, commodity, mode, and port. So we have 3 different dashboards here. You can search by port and commodity, state and commodity, or state and port. And each one has a little description of what each one does. basically, the first one allows you to search by mode, value, and weight with Canada and Mexico by port. And then the next two has the same data available, but this time by origin or destination state of U.S. imports and exports. And then you might ask yourself, well, why do we have to have three dashboards? Why don't we have just one with all the information together? And the reason behind that is because our source for the data is the United States Census Bureau. They provide us the data through a special agreement, and part of that agreement prohibits us from revealing too much business-sensitive data. So we kind of have to split it up like this. And so to do a live demo, what I'd like to do is open up one of our dashboards under Port and Commodity. And the first thing we see is a historical trend overview of trade with Canada and Mexico, or sometimes referred to as NAFTA, together. And this black line here is U.S. Commodity freight flows with Canada and Mexico combined. And the next two, it's broken down by Canada and Mexico separately. And then we also have the same data by imports and exports below. And that is the historical overview tab. Overview is just a more basic view of the same data I was showing in the line graphs there. But what I would like to do is actually go into the Ports by Commodities tab up here, where we can do some more detailed analysis. So the first thing we want to do here is select the start date and the end date for which we want analysis. And for example, if we choose January 2016 as the start date and December 2016 as the end date, and the time period for comparison we want to choose as the previous year. So then this will compare January 2015 to January 2016, or actually all of 2015, the months in 2015 to all the 12 months of 2016. And that's by default. We can also do previous month or previous quarter. So if we want to do the most recent data available, we can select the current month available at this time, which is December 2017 data. So this is just comparing the month of December, the 31 days in December 2017 to December 2016. And a measure, you can do the value in millions, which actually presents the data in billions, or the actual value, or we can do short tons as well. So we'll just click actual value. And what we see here is for the yearly comparison of December 2016 to 2017, what trade freight flows look like with Canada and Mexico combined. That's the total number here. And we can see in this pop-up box what the value is in December 2017, and below that is the December 2016 value and how much it has increased or decreased. In this case, percent change was 7.4% increase, and it also breaks it down by imports and exports. And if we want, we can also get the same data for Canada and Mexico separately. If you scroll down more, we can see the information broken down by mode of transportation. We can see that truck is the most heavily used mode, with freight flows along the northern and southern borders, followed by rail and vessel, pipeline. And we can also see the top ports where commodity freight flows are flowing through, and also the commodities. Now, these are, again, all the total numbers with both Canada and Mexico combined. If we just want, say, freight flow data with Canada, we can select Canada, and then that will show us that data. You can see that Mexico gets grayed out at that point. And then we can, let's say we just want to know the same information for truck only. We click on the truck bar, and that will gray out the other modes. And so we can see that in this time frame for freight flows with Canada, U.S. and Canada, by truck, it was $26 billion. In the current time period versus the last time period is $25 billion, a percentage change increase of 6.4%. And Detroit, Michigan was the top port with $8.6 billion of trade, followed by Buffalo, Niagara Falls with $4.4 billion. And the reason why this is orange, not blue, is because trade value was down 3.3% as indicated by that red downward triangle compared to last period. And over to the right, we can see the commodities, the top commodities that went through these ports by truck. And we can see the top commodity was motor vehicles and parts with almost $5 billion just in that month of December 2017, followed by computers and parts, electrical machinery, and so on. So if we want to know what's going through only Detroit, Michigan, we can select that one, and we'll get the top commodities going through the port of Detroit, Michigan by truck. If we select rail, for example, we get the top commodities by rail through Detroit, Michigan, or Port Huron. If we want data for pipeline, we can select that, and we can see that mineral fuels is the top commodity. And if I double click on Port Huron again, it goes back to the default view, which is all the top ports for pipeline. Now, this is the dashboard view. Like I said, it presents the data in a visually appealing and engaging way for the user to be able to interact with the data very simply by clicking on selections. We also have a map here where you can zoom in to view the port level data. If we hover over that, we also get some data as well. But if we want to download the data in the traditional old spreadsheet format, we also have that option available as well. And we get to here by clicking on data query. So previously I was on dashboard. When I click on data query, it takes me to the search interface. And here I can make my selections and click on Show Data, and it will download the data, and I can export it into a spreadsheet by clicking here, Download, and do crosstab. So that has pretty much summed up my presentation. I will turn it over back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Sean. So I did see a couple of questions in the chat pod from Supin Yoder. First question, I think that it popped up during your presentation, Sean, is what is the level of geographic detail that's used? And then following that, for air travel database, do we have any transferred airport information?
Okay, so to answer the first question, what level of geographic detail, we have the data by port of entry or exit for value, and sometimes for weight. Like I say sometimes because we don't always necessarily have export weights for surface modes. We do, however, have them for air and vessel. So yeah, you can roll up the data by state of origin or destination, or you can drill down to the actual port level. So like I was demonstrating before, Port Huron, Michigan, or Buffalo, Niagara Falls, or Laredo, Texas, down to the customs, and when I say customs, I mean CBP port designated point of entry or exit. And that's pretty much. So, I know sometimes there may be two ports in a customs district, like in Michigan and Detroit, you have the Windsor Tunnel and the Masseter Bridge. But in some cases like that, we roll up the data for those two crossings. We don't necessarily have both of them, separated out. The second question regarding air travel and airport information. So the transborder database is actually freight focused. We don't have any passenger or airport information available for in that database. I mean, we do have data by port of entry and exit, but I don't believe, and my colleague Steve Beningo is on the other line. He's the program manager for the Transborder Data Program. He can answer that question a little bit better than I can, but I don't believe that we do provide the specific airport information for trade with Canada and Mexico. Is that right, Steve?
Right. So Supin, you're talking about transfer of passengers, and the transborder data is only freight, and the border crossing data only covers people crossing the border into the United States by land or ferry modes. So air travel, as far as transfer of passengers, that's in our Office of Airline Information, and maybe Rolf can speak a little bit on that as far as those data. Do you have any comments on that, Rolf?
Well, certainly not for cargo. We know how much is going between individual airports, but we don't know how much is going through. For passenger traffic, yeah, we can get at passenger flows through airports, the origin-destination data set, and as well as knowing how many people are traveling between specific airport pairs.
Right. In regards to the transborder air data, if that's what Supin is focusing on, so for that, it covers where the cargo comes into the country and not necessarily its final destination. The final destination would be in the state of origin or destination data, but we wouldn't have anything on a second place where it was flown by plane. So like if you had a piece of cargo that went from Toronto to Memphis to Oklahoma City, that would be covered in, most likely it would be under the New Orleans Customs District. That's where most of the cargo coming into Memphis gets put under. But it would not be under Oklahoma City, or if the shipment went on to Los Angeles, it wouldn't be under Los Angeles. It would be under the New Orleans Customs District.
And that's done intentionally by the Census Bureau. They mask the data for confidentiality reasons. And then there's another question here. Are you planning to FAF 4 zone level or just keep at state level? Steve or Rolf, do you have any?
Sorry, I was like looking as far as the previous question, as far as what I was asking in the text box. Could you repeat it, Sean?
Supin asks, are you planning to FAF 4 zone level or just keep at state level?
The transporter data itself does not go below the state level, at least in reliable ways. So at the moment, we're not planning to go to the greater geographic detail that the freight analysis framework provides.
Right, that is correct. We just get the data by state level, and the source data does not have any information on the level of geographical detail used in FAF.
Okay, are there any other questions on the line? All right, if you don't have any other questions, I'll just hand it over to the moderator, Mike Green.
Thanks, Sean. Well, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, Rolf, and thank you, Sean, for your presentations, and thank you, everyone, who participated. Following this presentation, everybody who registered for the webinar will see an email from me containing a link to this recording and potentially copies of the presentations if people are interested in it. I will make sure to use the same email addresses that were listed in the Eventbrite registrations. Stay tuned for our next webinar, which we'll announce within the next month or two. This is a regular series that the Bureau of Transportation Statistics holds, and I believe the next one should be coming up in May, but again, we'll send out the announcement within the next few weeks or so. So if there is nothing else, thank you everyone for attending, and have a great day.